All right. So we've got just me and Thiago today. A couple of other discussion items, nothing else. I'll read this out loud just for anyone that's watching the video later. Becca is not for this week's, but for next week. She has some agenda items she's going to put on there around some design questions. She would encourage everyone to attend if you can, or at least check the meeting notes. Front-end engineers in particular, there are a few things that we've got in the research design phase that we would like a lot of input on. So that'll be good. The question Thiago and I were just started chatting about Threat Insights monthly office hours calls. So these have been happening regularly for well over a year now, I think at this point, once a month. The original goal was to try to get folks from outside of our team to come and join, where it could be more of a centralized location for people to ask questions, have some interaction with the Threat Insights team if they needed to. I've been attending these fairly regularly when I can for months, and it seems like we don't really have anybody attending except for occasionally a few of the Threat Insights folks. Nobody from outside the team is going. We often have great coffee chats, but kind of wonder if at this point we've tried to drum up some interest and we're not getting any takers. Should we just take it off the calendar?
And before we started recording, I was saying that people seem happy to ask questions in Slack. I'm writing that down now. And it's been working well. Most questions get answered on the same day. Sometimes they extend over, the discussion extends over for a few days, but in general, it's working well, I think. So I'm supportive.
Yeah,
let's cancel it.
I guess I'm kind of wondering, is it worth? So I think the questions kind of come in two varieties. Most of them fall into the bucket of, oh yeah, we know that answer. We can answer it really quickly for somebody. I'm wondering if the things that people want to dig into a little deeper, if maybe that was kind of the intent of the office hours, is if you want something a little bit deeper with the engineering team or me, we could have that as a time set aside so that we're not just ad hoc handling a lot of these requests. I'll admit, I hadn't even occurred to me for a very long time to try to push people off towards that meeting. That's the only reason I can see keeping it, is if we feel like there's too many questions that require more like kind of digging in and discovery.
It's funny you should mention that, because I just added something to planning breakdown that is not really planning breakdown, and it's this sort of discussion. So yeah, maybe make it ad hoc and say, or change, say, hey, if there's no agenda, it's automatically canceled. I'm not going to show up. And every now and then when there's an agenda, we do a better job of advertising and drumming up people to come in. So I'm changing my opinion there on what I wrote in the agenda.
I like the maybe just putting something at the top of the agenda that if there's nothing there for the next one, it's automatically canceled. I think that's a good way to go about doing that. All right. Well, that's great. I'm happy to give that a try. If we can let folks know and you sort of re-socialize that message.
Sounds good. Since we don't have any other items, are you happy to jump into my impromptu discussion? It's going to be lacking a few people, but at least you and I can give the Threat Insights consensus, I guess.
Oh, is this the one you put up under the planning breakdown?
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen because it might be useful to set up the stage for it.
We'll say, just for the record, we invited all the other stakeholders and told them we were making important decisions in the synchronous meeting. If they're not here, they've abdicated their right to vote.
Just kidding, but really, we need to decide something. The background on this is Daniel and I collaborated a little bit on this menu. There are some idiosyncrasies about the GraphQL API. It doesn't work ideally. There's some other issues about how we're using the fields in the report, but let me see if I can explain the gist. This menu here, the tool menu, which is actually used to filter the report type of a vulnerability, is populated based on what's available on the project. And our scanners will populate our analyzers or analyzers that integrate with GitLab will populate that report. We pass that, and then depending on what's available and what's populated, it goes in that. That's all great. So traditionally, this has been populated from a mix of sources, but I'll skip too much of the history just to say that the way the GraphQL is currently implemented and the way we're currently populating the reports, they are not working well together. So if you use the fields as they meant to be, it sort of breaks this menu. So there was a proposal to sort of change this structure here that separated the grouped by vendors to instead group by the type or the tool, the scan type. And then these fields are populated, it's explained here. So it's populated from the analyzer name, analyzer vendor. Sorry, this is adding to it. Yeah. Where is it written? Oh, got lost, Matt. Ah, there you go. Show the scanner name under the report type and the analyzer vendor. So, man, I've been on this issue and it's getting to my head. So this is the scanner name.
No.
It comes from scan.scanner.name. And this is the vendor name. It comes from scan.analyzer.vendor.name, I think. And the question, the discussion that spawned was from a very simple question asked by Fabian, which was, can we make scanner optional now that analyzer is required? So in the release 15.0.0 of the security report schemas, we have scan.scanner required and scan.analyzer required. And I believe these two fields are useful, Matt. I think there's some consensus around that it's useful to know the scanner version, the analyzer version. Sometimes the analyzer and the scanner are the same. That's happening with Dast, for example, for Browserker. The analyzer and the scanner same. It
Hey,
seems
Thiago,
like yeah.
So real quick, just so people watching this are aware, the whole confusion point, I think we've had this since we started, is the difference between an analyzer and a scanner. Would you give that quick elevator pitch on the difference?
Absolutely. So the scanner is the thing doing the job, the thing that actually finds the vulnerabilities or findings and reports them. The analyzer is what does the integration with GitLab. So a lot of times we'll write an analyzer that then gets a third-party scanner, we'll wrap that into our analyzer, and that becomes the integration with GitLab. So for example, container scanning has the container scanning analyzer, and it comes in a few different flavors. One has an integration with the Trevi scanner, which is done by Aqua Security. And there's another one with the Gripe scanner, which is done by Anchor. But the analyzer is the same. So in a sense, when we generate that report, we say, hey, scan.analyzer.name is container scanning, scan.analyzer.vendor is GitLab, and the version of the analyzer is, I don't know, we're on version 5 something now. And then depending on what flavor you're using, the scan.scanner.name will be populated with Trevi or Gripe, and the version will be populated with the respective version, and so will be the vendor. That's the...
I'm gonna give that a round of applause. That was a flawless execution.
That's the background.
Very
So
confusing.
an interesting thing is that for reasons that maybe not even important, some of our analyzers report the scan.scanner.vendor as GitLab. And then this was part of the discussion here. If I come right now and give the correct information, say, hey, the container scanning is by GitLab and the vendor is Aqua, this is what's going to happen. It's gonna throw an entry here when this is not really what we meant. Because even though the scan is done by Aqua, the integration is done by GitLab. So if somebody has an issue with that integration, if there's a bug or something's behaving strangely, the first point of contact should be GitLab, not Aqua Security. But we digress. So back to the simple question. Now that we have both scan.scanner, scan.analyzer, and scan.analyzer is required, can we make scan.scanner optional? The answer seems to be yes. Matt, right? Optional, but not removed.
Yeah, I think that was from my comment that I left last night, was my concern with that. If we remove it, that's going to be a painful removal for a lot of the vendors we've already got integrating. But if it's optional, I don't think it hurts anything.
I agree with that. Cam did a good job here, saying that summarizing our choices. So he was saying, let's use the scanner for the name number. That's option 1, and then some analyzers will just have to create a name. So what he means by that is using the case of the container scanning analyzer. We wanted to populate the menu like this. So we would take the scanner name and put it here. And then we would take the vendor, the analyzer vendor, and put it here. But if I use the analyzer name in the menu here, this would show container scanning and then container scanning again. It's not a big deal for analyzers, I think. It's a small change. You can say, well, my analyzer name now is Trivi, and the analyzer vendor is called GitLab. I think that's an okay solution. It does need coordination, so I'll get to that. The other one is we stick just to scan.analyzer. And then he made an argument that scanner is not required, but I think we want to keep that. So if we're considering option 2, it stops here. We don't say that it's not required. And then the other option is what we're talking about here. Like we use a scan analyzer name and scanner name. And then if the scanner name is missing, we'll just backfill with the analyzer name. It does create a little bit more work for threat insights. I don't particularly love changing the data that was reported, but I don't know. I think if we document that clearly, it should be okay. So I don't mind that. But then, Matt, finally getting to the point that I wanted to say is like, when you came in here and you said, you threw in yet another option for the menu. And I'm thinking, right, now, if we're going back to the menu design, I don't think we're going to have time to settle the discussion and work out what the schema should be. So I was throwing out there, and I haven't seen Fabian's response. He seems to be in agreement, is that it's a lot harder to make an optional field mandatory, because you need to change the model name, and current integrations will have to adopt that or they'll break. So the easier the easier thing to do is it's to make something that's mandatory optional. So I was proposing that, right? Just because we're looking to release the schema 15.00 in 15.4. It's 1 or 2 milestones away, depending how you're counting. And if we don't do anything, the release that goes out requires both properties. It requires scan.analyzer and scan.scanner. And my argument was that we'll take our time on this, do what we actually want without, compromising based on how long we have to implement, which gives us at least until 15.8 to settle on a menu, and any time after 15.4, we can actually make that scan.scanner optional and then adjust as needed. That was a really long, 10 minutes of preface just to put out a proposal. But Matt, please make me stop talking.
That was great.
That's good. Thank you.
Honestly, I tried to read through a lot of the history last night. That was a much clearer, more succinct and direct route to it. I don't mean to complicate things with the menu. I think what I was sort of pointing out is we have an existing menu structure. Going back and reading through the history, and I realize this is many, many months ago, so I'm sure my thinking on this has changed a little bit, but it started with a proposal to restructure the current menu layout based on a limitation in the data model, the APIs, that kind of thing. So seeing where the conversation evolved to, I was kind of my thinking on that was, could we actually keep the existing menu structure where you're using, and I guess I need to be more explicit about this. I think the analyzer vendor name is what creates those top level sections. If I didn't say that in the comment, we can.
You did. Let me share again.
Okay, good. So if we do that.
Like this.
So those would be the analyzer names, and the secondary level menu is the analyzer name, if we want to call it that. If it doesn't have one, I think this is where I was saying we're already essentially calling the analyzer name the same thing as the tool type for GitLab analyzers. So if we make some of these inferences downward like that, I guess my hope was that we could not have to change any of the analyzers and move towards a model that would let us still have the specificity, like for the, the example of GitLab SaaS. If we do have 2 different scanners, we would be able to expose those names as whatever. So you might see Spotbugs and ESLint appear there. I don't think we need to concern ourselves with the scanner vendor in that context, because that's like one layer above, kind of like the none of your business, don't worry about it, right? Because it's that analyzer vendor who you're going to pick up the phone and call. That's why we structured it this way in the beginning. So,
plus, it'll be on the vulnerability details page anyway.
It'll be on the details page, exactly. So and then for vendors, I think that would still work, because the analyzer, is there an analyzer vendor required today? I actually don't remember that off the top of my head.
That's what's being, no. So it was introduced, the whole analyzer property, scan.analyzer property, which includes name and vendor and version, was included as optional in 14 something.
Okay. So in the meantime, until we decide to make that required, it seems like, could we infer that from the scanner vendor, if there's no vendor property at the analyzer level, and then the analyzer name, if not provided, would also just be inferred from the report type, so that we would continue with this menu structure.
Yeah, we could. So that was the where the question came from in 15.00, and this is the schema version, not GitLab. Scan.analyzer as a whole is being made required. So now you require an analyzer that adopts 15.00 is required to populate these 2 properties. And for some of our analyzers, they'll be populated with the same values. So scan analyzer name will be dast, scanner name will be dast, and vendor GitLab version, and so and so. But for other analyzers, it's different. So what I wanted to do with my last push there to say, hey, let's just release this as it is, as required, is one, anyone adopting that, and some analyzer groups may choose to adopt it as of 15.4. I think container security might. It's not a huge change, to be honest, in analyzer. The worst part is coordinating what happens to the menu and so on. We'll have all the data required to build whatever menu we feel suits best the users and whatever we're trying to do there. And as a result of this discussion, we find out that, hey, it turns out we don't need this particular piece of information. We can make it optional. Then we're free to do that. Then 15-1-0 of the schema can just say, you know what, scan.scanner is now optional because we're doing so and so, or even the analyzer. But
so I just realized something as I was talking through this with you, and I kind of want to change a little something I said. I don't actually know, or I'm very unclear now on the value of having the scan.analyzer.name, because as a, if I'm a third-party vendor, my tool name is probably the specific branded name of whatever it is that I'm offering, but the technology is still going to be, it's a static analyzer, dynamic analyzer, whatever. So if we're classifying it like that, I don't know, right? Like, do I want to see vendor B fancy name here, or would I rather see this is vendor B's task tool? I honestly don't have a great answer for that. And for all the GitLab tools, we've always spoken about them at the analyzer level, which is the same thing as tool, effectively, for a naming convention. So it seems like it'd be kind of a very narrow use case, because as a vendor too, I would assume they would provide scanner.name. Sorry, yeah, scan.scanner.name. So I'm kind of wondering, is like analyzer.name a solution in search of a problem?
You well within your rights, Matt. And what I wanted to do, you said before, oh, I didn't want to complicate. I don't resent that at all. What I really want to do is have that conversation without having to worry, oh my God, we're about to release this and we're not going to have time. Let's rush and do it. Like, so I think that's a good thought. And the side proposal there, the writer with the proposal to release 15.0.0 as is that maybe we push this back to design, because then we can think of maybe even problem validation or solution validation. Just say, hey, what is this menu doing, and what do we want to say show in it? All right, that's awesome. We managed to use the whole rest of the meeting.
We did. It felt productive.
No, yeah, this thing had gone for days. It was time to have at least one sync. I'm happy you and I are on the same page. It looks like all the engineers are coming together there. I'll wait to see what others say, but I'm super happy with this. Like, release 15.0.0 as is. Keep working on this issue. If he needs UX, we'll do UX or whatever he needs. And then we'll adjust the schemas. And meanwhile, the menus will continue working as they are, and anyone doing integrations it will be free to use 15.0.0 from GitLab 15.4. Yay!
Right.
Solution decision. Cool. And closing remarks.
That's all I got.
All right, I'll
great.
post this somewhere. Thank you. Have
Thank
a beautiful day.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah.